All right, biggest concerns for South Carolina football in 2024. Is it a person, place, or thing? It could be all three. Locked On Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. It is great to have you along. I hope everyone had a fantastic weekend, having a great start to their Monday as well, if that's even possible. It is an 88 and very muggy in Columbia, South Carolina, where we are looking live and starting another week of Locked On Gamecocks. Very happy to have you along. Thank you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like I want them to. But listen, this summer, told you guys before, FanDuel's hooking up fans and customers with a boost or a bonus all day, every day, every single day. Pretty awesome. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's jump in and get started with the show. We got a good one today. I'm very excited to get back. Pardon me. We're going to close out July. We're like 33 days from kickoff. It's even less than that if you count ACC football, which not all of us do, but I am excited as somebody that's from Atlanta for that Georgia Tech Florida State game, but very excited. I want to get into the show today and start with this. Biggest concerns for South Carolina. And I teased it in the start of the show. Is it a person, place, or a thing? Is it all three? I keep looking at this, and I'll admit, I feel like one of the reasons I chose this subject is because I feel like I've been maybe a little bit too positive about some things with South Carolina football going into 2024 and telling you, hey, like, here's how they can beat Ole Miss or LSU or Mizzou and get a couple upsets. So what are some of the things, if we're being realistic and objective here, what are the biggest concerns? And I think I keep looking at this when I come back to it, okay? The thing I keep coming back to is the biggest concern is if you don't improve at all. And when I say that, I almost say it with so much hesitation, because to be honest, it feels like it's like that doesn't even seem possible. There's so much room for improvement, right? And we've talked about, I think one of the first shows I did on here when I took over for the show is, guys, like your two biggest weaknesses a year ago, the secondary and the offensive line, they could be your biggest strengths. Who knows? But I think if you're looking at what the biggest concerns can be, it is if there's no improvement. If this offensive line, which you have added quality depth to and quality talent to, what if they don't get better? What if they give up 41 sacks like they did last year? Right? Like that is, I mean, that's a concern. What if you don't, on the other side of the ball, aren't able to get any more production from your sack getters, which seems like an odd phrase. I don't think I should ever use that again. But if your D-line and your edge rushers aren't able to go get any sacks, but again, you've added even more talent there and also more depth there. But when I say more talent, you've added more talent than you have on the offensive line, which is saying something. I brought this up before. You got 9 guys that are competing for those 5 spots in the offensive line. Every single offensive lineman stayed in the month of May, as well as Rocket Sanders, to get better and kind of go through strength and conditioning. And as this summer has gone on, you've seen so much more from people and saying, man, it feels like this team is not getting enough recognition and they're going to be better than people think. And I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. So, but I think the biggest concern is, what if you don't improve? Because there are several units and several places that you need to have improvement on. And if you don't improve, what does that look like? So when I look at the specific areas of need, obviously offensive line, the defensive backs, like those are 2 areas I think especially. But where I would start is your receiving core, because I feel like you've got depth there. But there's also one thing that I've brought up, and I'm like, hey, listen, don't be worried, because we've seen somebody make that jump from a year 1 to year 2, or this year to that, like next year, where it's like, hey, very average, run of the mill. I think the average I threw out there was like, for some of these guys, Josh Van, Xavier Legette, even Juice Wells, like from one year to the next, it was like, hey, here's an average of like 12 to 15 catches and less than 200 yards. So all of a sudden, boom, you lead the team in receptions and receiving yards, and you have this breakout year. What if Nick Harbor doesn't make that next step? Right? Like, what if Gage isn't that guy you got from the transfer portal? I think that's an area for concern. But even then, I think you look at it and it's like, okay, well, if that is not, if you aren't able to go there, what do you do next on offense? And the answer is, well, you got to focus on the run. And I think that's going to be a focus of this offense anyway, is focusing on the run, having Sean Elliott, like we talked about, and the importance of him and this like hard-nosed, run the ball down your throat mindset on offense. I think that is a guy that, like I've said, I think he makes a world of difference in year one. But what if you go to the running backs and then you don't have Rocket Sanders isn't healthy, right? What if the running back depth that you added doesn't end up producing on the field? That's the other concern. But again, like these are all like, I feel like I don't even think those are things to be like, well, if you don't have the depth at receiver, you're also not going to have the depth at running back. It's like an and/or. Like all of these feel like very much so like worst case scenarios. But I think that's the biggest area where I'm like, well, like, that would have to be the concern. And I just, to be honest, I don't see it happening. But I think that you are going to depend on the fact that like that defense has to get better, which it should. The only area that I can see for South Carolina not being able to get to 6 wins is, man, across the board, if you did not get better and you didn't improve, then that's where you're going to have a season that is, you're going to have some issues with fans being upset and with Shane Beamer eventually being on the hot seat or whatever. But that is a very, very big if. That's a very big if. It would have to take a lot, I feel like, for this team not to improve. And there's so many things to look at from a positive standpoint where, you know, I don't see it happening. Like, I do think that the biggest concern from a position unit standpoint would have to be your receivers and tight ends, right? Because you added such quality depth everywhere else, and you have experience everywhere else. That is the biggest drop off. So, like, maybe even the concern is, well, it's not that we have that guy that does put up the ridiculous year. Hopefully it's Nick Harbor or Gage or whoever. Like, sure. But does he have a supporting cast as well? And it's not just one dude where Lenore Sellers is having to like drop back, run for his life, and throw the ball up to him. I think the other thing is that the two biggest things you have to avoid, because as deep as the roster is comparatively to like other rosters they've had in the past, especially under Shane Beamer, you have to avoid the injury bug, and you have to figure out the schedule. The schedule cannot go sideways. So I think that when you talk about like getting through September, worst case scenario is you're 2-2. Would love to get 3-1. Cannot be under 2-2. Cannot lose to a good old Dominion team and overlook them, right? There's no point in this season where you can look at it and allow things to get sideways. So I think it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have a very good group effort from a leadership standpoint, from a Shane Beamer standpoint, being able to come in and get these guys ready to play each and every week and get back up after losses. Like, how well can you bounce back? Because there's going to be losses. You're not going to go undefeated. Hardly anyone's going to go undefeated in this day and age of SEC football and or college football. But how can you get back up after losses? You know what I mean? And then I think the biggest thing for me is starting and finishing. That October schedule is very difficult. But starting and finishing strong is going to be a staple. It's going to have to be a staple of this team and this program. Can you get through November at 3-1? Can you get through September at 3-1? Because then, you know, you could have a bad month of October and you have that 3-game stretch. Ole Miss, Bama, OU, 2 of those games on the road. If you can still, you can even have that slide as long as you can get through September and November. So I think that this is going to be a really, really, I don't want to say masterclass, but it's going to have to be a very good job from Shane Beamer to manage the schedule, manage the expectations, and then also get back off the mat off of, you know, ups and downs that happen with every team year round. So that is what I think the biggest concern could be. The biggest concern for this team is if you did not make a jump in year 4 from Shane Beamer. And it could happen, but guys, that just seems so unlikely. Just so unlikely. All right, that is all for the biggest concerns, and we'll dive into more of it. I think that like very surface level stuff, but we will get into more of it as we get closer to the season, especially in September, and we start seeing what happens in fall camp, gearing up to the start of the year. Up next, we're going to talk about Spencer Rattler, former Gamecocks star quarterback, now in New Orleans Saints camp. I got the chance to talk to some Saints insiders, a host of LockedOn, and a couple other guys that cover the Saints, and Spencer Rattler just absolutely turning heads in Saints Minicamp. So we'll talk about that coming up for the break. But before we do, I want to talk to you about our good friends at Ibotta. One, super fun to say, but also 2, fantastic deals from Ibotta every day. Listen, are you taking the dream vacation this summer, but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, earn on hundreds of items from groceries, beauty supplies, even toys. I delve in all three of those things, guys. I need something else to go up here, so I'll have to get on Ibotta later today in my background here. So you can make money and make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year, y'all. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you get cash back right up front, y'all. That is cash that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards, whatever you want. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipts, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands, pretty awesome, and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. God, saving money at Lowe's over here, especially in Lexington, is a godsend. That'd be great. It's time for you to join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just to try Ibotta using the code LockedOnCollege when you register. So go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, that's IBOTTA, and start earning cash back using the code LockedOnCollege. Make sure you do that today. Also, I want to tell you about our good friends at Factor as well, guys. Factor, listen, warmer, sunnier days are calling. You fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals and your fitness goals in time for summer or the end of summer, thanks to a menu of chef-created meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you even waiting for? Guys, I say it every year. I try to get ready for summer and get rid of this dad bod. Never do it. So let's make an effort to do it before kickoff, and we can and get ready for tailgate season as well. There's with 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every single week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals this summer with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to desserts, everything in between. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon as well. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use the code LockedOnCollege50, all one word, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. So head on over today. When we return, we will get into Spencer Rattler turning heads at Saints Camp. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, guys, welcome back into Locked On Gamecocks. We are into our next topic of the day, and it's Spencer Rattler, guys, former Gamecock quarterback turning heads. And listen, I know that most of us probably don't care about the Saints. I would assume so. Living here, I've lived in Atlanta and Columbia for my entire life. So between the Saints, between the Falcons and the Panthers, I think that's probably where a majority of this audience probably lies. If there's some Saints fans, welcome in. I think the best thing I personally can say about the Saints is that Spencer Rattler is now a quarterback for him. I want to talk about some of the feedback he's gotten so far at camp and minicamp and what they're saying. Potential of him being able to have some playing time this year, and also what that means for South Carolina, big picture. But before I do it, I wanted to ask you this. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Listen, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, so listen, former Gamecock quarterback Spencer Rattler, as I've said, there's been a ton of buzz around him from Saints Minicamp out in Irvine, California. Now, I personally, this is one of my least favorite things we do in sports media, which is it's so perfect for this day and age of sports media. And I put finger quotes on that because more than ever, you got a ton of people that are quote unquote covering the game and doing so from a strictly social media standpoint. So you'll see clips of something happening and it being blown way out of proportion. Hey, Daniel Jones had several underthrows. Tua Tagovailoa was a big one a couple years ago. Look at this duck that Tua threw. Tim Tebow, similar story. His kind of panned out to be that way with his career, but you do see a lot of overreaction to very small clips and moments on social media from minicamp this time of year. I think part of it is that we're all itching for football. We're all itching for content, and we're excited because, God, we are so close. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. We have football on Thursday, guys. Like I told you last week, last Thursday was the last Thursday without football until February. That's awesome. That gets me so fired up. Now, listen, whether you're a Saints fan or not, doesn't matter. I think it's always good. You want to see these guys that come from your school go into the next level and do well there. And when Spencer Rattler was drafted in the 5th round, I think it was 141 overall, you sat there and you were like, oh, man, it's lower than I thought he should go. Obviously, a couple of years ago, he was projected to be a Heisman frontrunner and potential number 1 overall pick at times, or a first-round draft pick at the very least. And you could say he didn't live up to that hype, but it very much feels like he dropped unnecessarily, but he dropped to a spot that is a very good opportunity for him. If you know anything about the Saints, the depth they have at quarterback is not great. Derek Carr is sitting there. They have restructured his contract, so he's on for several more years. But there's loopholes to it, as there are with anything in sports, right? So like you talk about like some of the stuff and the feedback you're getting from Spencer Rattler and the situation he's going into. There's a lot of room for optimism on what he can do early because of how good he's looked. And I think the Saints have done a really good job of bringing him along. But here's what I'm so excited about Spencer Rattler. It's multiple reasons, okay? So here's the feedback first. This is all from our buddy Ross Jackson, who covers Locked On Saints. And I work with over at ESPN Baton Rouge for 104.5 ESPN there as well. Another one of my jobs that I have. So he said, he's out in Irvine right now covering the team. He said he's not going to vie for any real playing time in 2024. In the preseason, he will get and share a majority of the snaps with their other backup quarterback, Jake Haener, who's from Fresno State. You may recognize that name strictly because he took the god-awful Backstreet Boys media day post where he was like, it was just Google it. It's worth it. It's worth a Google, to quote the campaign. Can he make a move to start in year 1? Not without injury, no. But all the buzz from training camp, and you've seen some of the clips, Spencer Rattler is tearing it up in Saints camp. And they've done a really good job of bringing him along. One of the things they've done is, in this offense, especially with Clint Kubiak, it's a lot of motions, a lot of play action pass, and they have brought him along slowly to where he wasn't really doing that until now that they're in fall camp. So he's been able to learn the playbook. He's been able to do all those things. And it's not really anything that's that much dissimilar from the offenses he's run in college, especially at South Carolina. Just a lot more play action than he was probably used to before. But the feedback has been this. He makes every throw on the field. He can sling it. And the other quote was, kid's got an absolute rocket, and when he wants to rip it, he will absolutely flat out rip it. Every single receiver, this is a quote, every single receiver on the roster has said the biggest thing about Spencer is he can make every throw on the field. That almost seems cliche, but that's a disservice to what he is able to do, because his arm talent is different than a lot of people's. Like Tua, I'll go back to him as the example. Tua doesn't have that kind of arm talent. He just signed and got broke off a massive, massive deal. But he doesn't have that kind of arm talent. He is just able to be in a system that is able to utilize his strengths, and which is great. That's kind of what they're doing with the Saints and Spencer Rattler already. And on top of that, he can make every throw. Now, one of the other things I thought was super interesting is the biggest thing with him so far, like any rookie, is his decision making. He's made a lot of good decisions, and that's one thing I think that I've rarely heard from rookies is his decision making. It needs to improve. That's the biggest flaw he's had so far. But it is a situation where he has made way more good decisions, like the good decisions and his reads and all that kind of stuff. He's ahead of where most rookies are, and he's doing his decision making is like the good decisions far outweigh the bad decisions he's made. Still something he needs to work on, but whatever. He's learning a new system. They brought him along slow, but here's the thing that jumps out to me the most. So when I was talking to Ross, he said they have no plans on moving on from Derek Carr, especially this year. But even with the restructuring of his contract, there is a potential where after 2024, the Saints can move on from Derek Carr. So Spencer Rattler continues to develop, and he shows you that he is going to be the guy that you can bring on. They can get rid of Derek Carr immediately. What that also does, if you get rid of Carr and you get rid of all that, like that's a huge, huge, like free up of money on the salary cap. Stuff you can go use to build around Spencer Rattler. Offensive line is a huge necessity for the Saints, especially. But regardless, what that says to me is they restructured Derek Carr's deal before the draft, right? They have already said they're not planning on doing this, but they have already made the comments to media out there in Irvine. Yeah, we can move on from that. Like there's a pathway if we want, especially with how this has developed so far, where if it continues to, we can move on from Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler can be the guy. And if they don't, here's the thing, guys. I think it's so underrated when guys go and sit, right? Like it's one of the reasons I'm really high on Lenore Sellers. It's one of the reasons I think Carson Beck has had such a fantastic start to his career in Athens. The two biggest examples, I think, came from the same franchise in the NFL, and that's Aaron Rodgers sitting behind Brett Favre, and then Jordan Love sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. And you look at, I don't know if Jordan Rodgers is going to be, I'm sorry, Jordan Love. I know Jordan Rodgers, as much as I love him to death. He's not going to be a great NFL quarterback. I think that's already passed him by. But we don't know if Jordan Love is going to be as good as Aaron Rodgers. But look at the career Aaron Rodgers is able to have by sitting, learning the offense, learning the ropes, and not being pressured into. I always say this. I don't know why franchises are in such a hurry for their quarterbacks they drafted to be a bust. It is such a what have you done for me lately? And we want instant gratification in like our society in general now. And people are so easily mislabeled as a bust right off the bat. I'll give you an example, man. Mac Jones, I don't think is going to be a starting quarterback. But did you know that Mac Jones he was like a Pro Bowler in year one. In year 2 or 3, his offensive coordinator was the former defensive coordinator. Now, he didn't play well on the field, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and he was labeled a bust. My point is, I don't know why you'd be in a rush to be labeled as a bust. And if Spencer Rattler, there's a path to where he could play next year, there's also a path where he can sit and learn behind whether you think he's great at quarterback or not, Derek Carr, a tenured NFL starting quarterback, and he can learn from. I think that's great for a guy like Spencer. It's also the other part of it that he brought up was the Saints in the offseason have retooled and rehauled their entire offensive staff. New offensive coordinator, new play caller. It's Clint Kubiak, like I said. He's worked with a ton of NFL quarterbacks. But make no mistake about it, like even if he's drafted in the 5th round, which he was, this kid, Spencer Rattler, he is this staff's draft pick. Like you've heard like in college, right? Where it's like, well, this AD, this is his hire for the football team or for, in basketball or wherever. But it's his hire. So he's going to probably stick with that guy and give him a little bit more love or more opportunity, or the leash can be a little bit longer or whatever. As opposed to, well, it's not like we can move on from that easier. We have identified someone else we want to. And there's also projections for next year where Saints, media and also NFL guys that are projecting the draft already have them going after a quarterback again in round 1. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. As of today, though, this is the guy. This is the staff's quarterback pick for who they can potentially build around. And everything that has shown up so far has been all positive. And I tell you why that's also huge for South Carolina. Love it for Spencer Rattler for a ton of reasons, man. But that kid to go have success, I think he really benefited so much from South Carolina and kind of being able to revitalize his career. You could honestly make the case, man. There's a lot of the Lane Kiffin story or the Steve Sarkisian story in Spencer Rattler. And I remember doing a show, our Fourth and Wrong podcast with my co-host Tyler Huck, and I remember doing this show when we had Danny Cannell on, and even Danny Cannell said he kind of came off as like a little bit of an a-hole when he was, on that Netflix show when he was a senior in high school. Well, he was 17 or 18 years old, and he probably was pretty pissed that he was the starter at Oklahoma and then lost his job, albeit he lost to a potential number 1 overall pick and Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. But like the storm that was surrounding him and the way the fans treated him in Oklahoma, him being able to come to South Carolina, I think it gave him more of a settled home feeling, right? It's the epitome of like that welcome home thing. But what Beamer and company were able to do, and by giving him 2 years to start here in the SEC, was really revitalize his career, because he went from being labeled a bust before he was even in the NFL because of the drop off he had from year 1 to year 2 at Oklahoma. And I think there's a lot of the Lane Kiffin and Sark story to Spencer Rattler, where he didn't have the off-field stuff where it's like nearly as bad, but you had a situation where it's like, man, the perception of this kid was way worse than it probably needed to be, and he was able to build away from that, dig out of that hole, like that, whether it was fair or unfair. And if that kid can go have success in the NFL, says a lot for this program. Says a lot for this program. Says a lot for the program that didn't have a quarterback drafted, I believe, since Todd Ellis in the late 80s. I think it's like 87. I could be wrong with that. I need to get my stats right on that. But, I think that's a situation where like that his success and being a former Gamecock and having more years started here than he did at Oklahoma, like that success immediately coincides with being associated with the success of South Carolina. And I think it's huge to have that narrative be like, hey, listen, yeah, we didn't have anybody from 87 to 2023 or whatever, the 2024 draft. But look what we did now. Look what we did in 2 years with Spencer Rattler. That's huge. Huge for the staff if they are the long-term solution. Huge for recruiting, especially, and being able to recruit at the most important position, not only in football, but in all of sports. So I think him having success there would be huge for a number of reasons. I'm happy for Spencer Rattler. I think that anybody that knows that kid is like, man, like good for him. Good for him. And he's done a tremendous job and deserves all the success he's having because he's worked his ass off. Excuse my language. So there is that. Now, listen, before we move on to our final part of today and get into a little bit of recruiting stuff, and I kind of piggybacked on some of it, I want to talk to you about our good friends at FanDuel as well. Listen, it's the end of August. No, it's not the end of August. It is the end of July. I love sports. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. I'm telling y'all, get over to FanDuel.com today and sign up. Get yourself a what do you call it? An account and get going, because they are making deals every single day for fans and people on a daily basis, literally a daily basis. You are able to sign up and have a booster bonus every single day. This summer is hooking up all customers. Like I said, booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of what's left of your summer. Start looking at what's going on in not only Major League Baseball. They're starting for the trade deadline and see what teams are desperate, what teams are maybe like kind of mailing it in the rest of the year. Start making some easy money on that. Bet against the A's and the White Sox for sure. That's just guaranteed money. And start looking at some college football lines as well. So visit FanDuel.com and make sure you go check that out today. All right, let's close out the show with this, guys. I am very excited about this. Listen, recruiting has been crazy over the weekend. Not as much in South Carolina, but I saw this all weekend happening at Auburn. Auburn had Big Cat weekend, okay? And they were able to get, I think, 5 or 6 guys. They flipped a few from Bama, and they were able to jump from, I think, like 15th into the top 10. So here's what I've come to realize with the recruiting stuff. I have a very difficult time getting super amped up about recruiting in the summer. Just admittedly, I told you a couple weeks ago, it's the biggest time for it because of the way the calendar is set up, but I just have such a hard time because it's like, okay, cool, this kid committed. And then you have 4 months left to try and convince him to stay committed until signing day. And then the hard part for coaches is after they sign, you got to make sure that they don't transfer out. There was a kid that committed to Auburn this weekend, guys, that he committed to Auburn, and it's his 4th commitment he's made since September of last year. I can't remember. It's like Antonio Coleman. He's a defensive lineman, 4-star recruit out of Alabama. He committed to Alabama in September of last year, committed to Auburn. He flipped to Auburn in like December, then flipped to Bama again in April, and then just flipped to Auburn again at the end of July for Big Cat Weekend. So here's what I'm bringing up. I've seen a couple of South Carolina fans, that whether we've talked about it like in our mentions and whatnot, or on social media, whatever, a little bit frustrated with where the recruiting's at and missing out on some guys. And that sucks. I get it. But I think if we're trying to be realistic about what is going to happen moving forward, I think we're at a situation for South Carolina and Shane Beamer in year 4 where the recruits are going to come. You're already sitting at like 19, right? You have probably 6 to 8 more spots available. I could be wrong at the exact number. I'd have to look at the roster. I'd have to reach out to Darren Ursher, who knows way more about it than I do, for sure, since that's his job. But I'm looking at it right now, and you're sitting at 29th overall in the country. You got 19 commits, right? I think if you're being realistic, you're just going to have to deal with the fact that you're probably not going to get too many more of these commits until the later parts of the year. That's fine. Pick your spots and then make sure you go get them. Maybe that means that later in the season, when things like start to go well, then you start getting guys that are excited about the program. That's good. I think that sitting there at 29, I keep saying that the cutoff for me is you cannot be at 28. You need to be in the top 20 to 22 in the country. If there's anything we've seen from like historically looking at the numbers, teams that compete consistently and are above like that 8-win plateau, you need to be around the top 20 in recruiting. I'm not worried about it. You're sitting here behind Maryland, who's got a really good recruiter, Mike Loxley, like Georgia Tech, who's got a really good recruiter in Brent Key. But then I look at this stuff like this. Arkansas is at 26. I don't see Sam Pittman lasting there after this year, so I think you're going to jump higher than them. My main point here is it sucks you're missing out on a couple of these guys, especially in this wave of when other teams are kind of like all ramping this up. And it's also very orchestrated and choreographed that that's what they're doing. Like, Auburn doing Big Cat Weekend, it's built to be around this level of excitement specifically for the weekend. South Carolina's not doing that right now. You did just finish up summer camp, and Shane Beamer had a really cool comment. I thought he made. You had all these different campers. You had 2 from Canada that drove down from Canada. Guys, I can't even wrap my head around how many hours that would be. You could tell me 11, you could tell me 38, and I would believe you either way. But one of the reasons why he said is because those 2 guys said verbatim to him, well, we watched a game, at Williams-Brice last year. And we're like, we got to be there. Like that's awesome. That's testament to the environment the fans are building. So I think that when I look at the recruiting stuff, yeah, you want to get a couple of these guys, and there's still some commitments coming up, and we're gonna dive into this in tomorrow's episode. Some of the commits and the what's the word I'm looking for when you're in high school and you have a most athletic, what's it called? Why can't I think of the name? Guys, I'm so bad with words today. Which is bad because it's my job to say them. Anyway, high school superlatives. There it is. Nailed it. Well, look at some of the superlatives coming from the bigspur.com from the 247 site. They went ahead and did some of those for recruiting. I think when you look at some of the guys, you're going to have a couple that you still have your choose from. You can't sit here and get bogged down and feel like you're getting passed because, I mean, if we're being honest, you're still in the top 30, which when you haven't had a ton of people that you've hit on, I think 10 of the 19 guys you got were all in the month of June. So you're going to lose just some steam naturally. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It is a long time between now and signing day. It is a fool's errand to get uptight and worried about recruiting today when there's 4 months till signing day. If there's anything I've learned from this, and 17, 18-year-old kids, I can't even tell you the tattoos I wanted to get when I was 17. All of them, I would be my music choices, my tattoos, the stuff I would put as a Facebook status, all regretful. 17-year-old kids have a fickle mind that is not easy to make up, and I would not worry about what you're missing out on in July when there's 4 months left to close. So that is what I would say to South Carolina fans. Woosah, take a breath. Everything's going to be all right. Guys, that's the show for today. I appreciate you guys joining in. I hope you're having a fantastic Monday. Like I said, we will be back tomorrow with another show as well. Thank you for making South Carolina and Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, how about this? Go enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you again, guys. You'll have a great, fantastic rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.